Hi, and welcome to this Shout Education video. Here, we'll look at what's in hand sanitizer and examine how it works. Before we get started, I want to be clear that I am only going to discuss commercial, domestic-grade hand sanitizers, and only the most popular varieties. I am not going to look at hand sanitizers which use specifically antimicrobial chemicals. Let's start off by looking at the list of ingredients. Some of these are essential for the basic function, and some of them are optional depending on how it's going to be made, used, and marketed. For most hand sanitizers, the most critical ingredient is an alcohol, like ethanol, what we normally call alcohol, or isopropyl alcohol, which you might call rubbing alcohol. It's the alcohol that does the vital job of killing bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms. Optional components include water, hydrogen peroxide, glycerol, a jelly-like substance, and fragrances and colorants. Water can be added to dilute the alcohol. Alcohol diluted with a little water is more effective than pure alcohol. Hydrogen peroxide can be added to decontaminate the container, destroying any bacterial spores. Glycerol can be added to slow evaporation and to moisturize the skin. And jelly-like substances can be added to thicken the mixture. These can be natural gels like aloe vera or special plastics. We won't be looking in detail at these optional components. Instead, we'll be diving straight into the alcohol. To a chemist, an alcohol is a type of chemical whose molecules have at least one hydrogen atom, one carbon atom, and one oxygen atom, bonded in a particular way. This arrangement of atoms is called an alcohol group. Many chemicals with this group mix well with water and can help dissolve other substances. The alcohol with the smallest molecule is methanol, but that's toxic if you drink it and it evaporates very quickly. A better candidate is ethanol. When you hear the word alcohol, it's probably in reference to ethanol, which is a type of alcohol. It's made by fermenting sugars in brewing beer and wine, concentrated by distilling, or made in pure form on an industrial scale. A single molecule of ethanol contains 2 carbon atoms, 6 hydrogen atoms, and 1 oxygen atom. Pure ethanol, which is hard to get hold of, boils at only 78 degrees Celsius, is easily set alight, and can be lethal if drunk undiluted. Of course, we know it best as an ingredient in alcoholic drinks, but it's also added to petrol to make biofuels. The other alcohol most commonly used in hand sanitizers is isopropyl alcohol. It's only been produced in large quantities since 1920, and it's very tricky to make domestically. A single molecule of isopropyl alcohol contains 3 carbon atoms, 8 hydrogen atoms, and 1 oxygen atom. Pure isopropyl alcohol boils at a similar temperature to ethanol, is equally flammable, and should not be drunk. Otherwise, it's used in cleaning products and nail polishes, and to make other chemicals. Next, let's take a quick look at the targets of hand sanitization, the microbes. Bad bacteria, like E. coli, can cause stomach bugs. Bacteria cells have a lot in common with human cells. Viruses are much simpler and need other cells in order to replicate. You may be familiar with viruses like HIV, influenza, and adenovirus, although there are many varieties. Viruses are either wrapped in a membrane, these are called enveloped viruses, or they're naked, without a membrane, these are called non-enveloped viruses. Generally speaking, enveloped viruses are easier to kill. SARS-CoV-2, the coronavirus that causes COVID-19, is an enveloped virus. And we might also want to kill viruses that specifically infect bacteria. These are bacteriophages. These can be enveloped or non-enveloped. But before we press on with how alcohols deal with these little nightmares, let's have a look at just how small they are. The smallest bacteria and the largest viruses are about the same size, but generally bacteria are hundreds of times bigger than viruses. Bacteriophages have to be small enough to infect bacteria, and they are generally smaller than other types of virus. But even bacteria are generally much smaller than our red blood cells, one of the smallest types of cell in our bodies. And we're only just getting to the level of the human skin cell, something you'll still need a microscope to see. Roughly 4 red blood cells will fit end to end across one of your skin cells. But even then, it'll take 33 skin cells to span a single millimetre. To see how the alcohol in hand sanitizers work, let's take a closer look at your skin. When sanitizer meets microbe, moisture is drawn from the inside of any membrane, and the microbe shrinks. At this stage, the microbe may recover. It's only been deactivated, not killed. After further exposure, the microbe starts to dissolve and fall apart. It's at this point that bacteria and enveloped viruses are definitely killed. Finally, all the fragments, alive or dead, clump together. These clumps are easier to brush off the skin than individual fragments. So, if you use it properly, you can be confident of a thoroughly effective wash. Lots of things change as you change the percentage of the alcohol. But remember, there's no single perfect percentage that works for all scenarios. Let's start off looking at some of the simple factors. Hand sanitizer is generally more effective with a higher alcohol concentration. But the higher the alcohol concentration, the drier it will make the skin. Very dry skin can crack and leave you more vulnerable to infections. And since the alcohols are highly flammable, the higher the percentage of alcohol, the more flammable the mixture will be. Lastly, the alcohols will be more expensive than water and some other ingredients, so a higher percentage of the alcohol will generally be more expensive to produce. Now, let's dive into the specifics. Various sources recommend hand sanitizers at between 60% and 95% alcohol. Above 95%, there's no clear benefit, and in some circumstances, 100% alcohol is less effective. But these are just recommendations. Different types of microbe still react differently. Most bacteria will be killed off in about 30 seconds on contact with 60% alcohol. A higher concentration will speed this up, and lower concentrations will slow this down. If you have impatient kids, you might want to use a higher percentage. Enveloped viruses are more resistant and generally need longer exposure times than bacteria to be killed. And non-enveloped viruses are even more resistant, and minutes at high concentrations may not be enough to wipe them out. On the whole, be careful. There are exceptions. Just because a microbe fits into one of these groups doesn't mean that we can be sure how well hand sanitizer works on that particular microbe. Trust advice from health professionals about specific treatments for specific microbes. Our main takeaway from this is that the alcohol in hand sanitizer is responsible for killing the microbes. And the higher the alcohol content, the better. 60 to 95% alcohol is usually effective after 30 seconds of use, but some microbes are more resistant than others. And lastly, we add water, gels and moisturizers to improve comfort, regulate the alcohol percentage, and to keep skin healthy. If you enjoyed this video, please click the thumbs up icon or the subscribe button. Click the bell icon to get notifications. For those that are interested, here are a few extra nuggets of information. Generally, we see better results with isopropyl alcohol against bacteria and better results with ethanol against viruses. And those of you who've had a look around might have been frustrated that sources are often unclear about what the percentage of alcohol really means. It could be a percentage of the total weight or of the total volume. So on the right is a chart you can use to make rough conversions between the two. For many practical purposes, it won't make a huge amount of difference which way percentage is measured. Making this video required a lot of research, so I'm very grateful to all those involved in the creation of the listed publications.